She lost her job for hiding her sick son under the table. But when her new boss walked into the office and saw the child, he said only one thing: "I was that boy." What happened next is impossible to forget. Subscribe to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching this video. The clock on the wall ticked with cruel precision, each second a steady reminder that time was moving forward, even if Monica Harper felt stuck in place. The chemical smell of detergent hung thick in the air of the laundromat, mixing with the metallic scent of the machines and the constant thrum of dryers spinning late into the night. Fluorescent lights buzzed above, humming like a warning, and Monica's feet ached beneath her as she knelt by the industrial washer, wiping away the lint buildup with a rag that had seen better days. She had worked this job for nearly 7 months now, long enough for the managers to stop remembering her name and instead refer to her as the night girl. It was the kind of place where no one asked questions, which had been a blessing at first. Now she wasn't so sure. Her hands, once soft and steady from years of nursing patients in calm, climate-controlled rooms, were roughened and cracked. Her knuckles stung from bleach. Her back throbbed from hours of bending and lifting. But the worst pain wasn't physical. It came from the way people looked through her, like she wasn't really there. Monica had been a licensed nurse once. 3 years of nursing school, 2 years working in a pediatric unit, and another 2 in home hospice care. She had loved that work until everything fell apart after a single moment of conscience. She had spoken out, filed a formal complaint when a doctor ignored the pleas of a disabled patient. The retaliation came fast and cruel. Unprofessional conduct, the dismissal read. No hospital would touch her after that. Her license wasn't revoked, just suspended pending investigation. But in her world, that was the same as erasure. She had swallowed her pride, taken what she could get. And what she got was this: midnight shifts in a laundromat in East Oakland, where she mopped floors and scrubbed gum from underneath tables while trying not to breathe in too deeply. It wasn't noble, it wasn't healing, but it paid enough to keep the lights on. Barely. The small figure curled up behind the folding counter stirred, a soft cough breaking through the steady drone of the machines. Monica turned her head sharply, her heart clenching at the sound. She stood up quickly, wiping her hands on her apron as she stepped over to the counter. Beneath it, wrapped in a worn fleece blanket, lay her 6-year-old son, Corey. His breathing was labored again, shallow and uneven with that too familiar wheeze she had come to fear. He hadn't responded well to the new over-the-counter inhaler, cheaper and less effective than the prescription one she used to afford when she had insurance. Monica crouched beside him, brushing the curls from his damp forehead, trying not to let her panic show. "I'm here, baby," she whispered. "Mama's here." He blinked up at her, too tired to speak. His lips were slightly parted, chest rising and falling with effort. She checked his pulse quickly, still strong, thank God, and adjusted the blanket around him. It was a cold night, colder than it had been all week, and she could feel the draft from the broken back window even from here. She hadn't wanted to bring him. She knew the rules. No children on shift. It was posted clearly in the staff handbook, underlined and bolded. But what choice had she? The neighbor who usually watched him, a retired woman with a limp and a bad hip, had fallen and gone to the ER that afternoon. No backup, no family, no partner to call. Corey had been running a low-grade fever for days, but tonight it had spiked. Leaving him alone, even for a few hours, wasn't an option. So she brought him with her and tucked him into the corner, praying no one would notice. Most nights, no one ever came into the back. Her manager, Letitia, worked the day shift. Monica hadn't seen her in weeks. She figured she could make it through just this once. Just one night. At 2:17 a.m., the door to the back room opened. The sound was so unexpected Monica flinched, rising too quickly and knocking her shoulder against the edge of the counter. She turned, heart pounding. Letitia stood in the doorway, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Her tailored navy suit looked as crisp as it had at 9 a.m. the previous day. Her posture, her gaze, everything about her said control. Power. She was someone who had never missed rent, never skipped a meal, never felt the cold press of humiliation against her skin. "What is this?" Letitia's voice cut through the air like a blade. Monica opened her mouth, then closed it again. Words failed her. Her eyes darted back to Corey, who was now trying to sit up, startled by the voice. His breathing rattled in the silence. "Is that your son?" Letitia asked. "Why is your child here, Monica?" Monica felt heat flood her face. Her throat tightened. "He's sick," she managed. "I had no one else. I couldn't leave him alone." Letitia's expression didn't shift. "This is a workplace, not a daycare." Monica stood straighter. "I know that, but I couldn't miss another shift. I've already taken too many days off for his doctor appointments. I need this job." "Policy is clear," Letitia said coldly. "No children allowed on site. This is a liability issue, a safety concern, and a breach of company rules." "Please," Monica whispered, her voice cracking. "He won't be any trouble. He's just sleeping. Just let me finish my shift." But Letitia shook her head. "This is unacceptable." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her authority filled the room like smoke. "I'm sorry, Monica. You're terminated, effective immediately." There was a pause, a moment where time seemed to stop. The hum of the dryers faded. Monica's breath caught in her chest. "What?" she said, barely audible. "You'll receive your final paycheck within 3 to 5 business days," Letitia said, already turning. "Please gather your things and leave the premises." "No, please." Monica stepped forward, but Letitia was gone, her heels clicking on the tile as she walked away. Monica stood frozen for a long time. Then, slowly, she crouched back down beside Corey, who looked up at her with wide, frightened eyes. "Are we leaving, Mama?" She nodded. Her throat burned. "Yeah, baby. We're leaving." Outside, the sky was dark and heavy, a fine mist falling like ash from the clouds. The air was colder than before. Monica wrapped Corey in her coat and clutched him close as she stepped onto the sidewalk. Her blouse soaked through almost instantly, sticking to her skin. Corey whimpered against her neck. They walked through the silent streets, past shuttered storefronts and closed bus stops. People hurried by under umbrellas, never glancing at the soaked woman holding a sick child. Monica didn't care. All she could think about was the weight of him in her arms, the sound of his breathing, and the crushing silence where her future used to be. Each step felt like a lifetime. Her job was gone. Her child was sick. Her savings were nearly gone. Her phone was dead, and she had no one left to call. But she walked. "I'm not giving up," she whispered into the night. "You hear me, Corey? I'm not giving up." And somewhere inside her, beneath the exhaustion and fear, a flicker of something remained. Not hope, not yet, but the refusal to quit. And for now, that would have to be enough. The rain didn't stop. By morning, it had thickened into a steady downpour that seemed to press against every window pane in the city. Monica sat in the cracked plastic chair of the county welfare office, her coat still damp and her shoes squelching with every slight movement. Corey lay stretched across two chairs beside her, his head resting in her lap, a thin blanket pulled up to his chin. His breathing was a little steadier than the night before, but every now and then a wet cough would shake his small frame, and Monica would instinctively lay a hand on his chest, counting the seconds between each rise and fall. The waiting room smelled of wet clothes, anxiety, and disinfectant. Her name was called eventually, but the meeting inside was short and fruitless. There were rules, they said, forms she hadn't brought, employment history she couldn't prove, a process that took time. Time she didn't have. They handed her a pamphlet for emergency shelters and a number for the county's family services office. She nodded politely, took the papers, and walked out with her son held close against her chest once more. The drizzle soaked into her again, unrelenting. By nightfall, she had found herself standing in front of a weathered brick building with a faded sign, St. Agnes Family Shelter, women and children only. The woman at the front desk barely looked up as she handed over a clipboard and gestured toward a folding chair. Monica filled out the forms with numb fingers, her answers concise. Name, child's name, emergency contacts, none. Previous address, evicted. They were assigned a shared room with 3 other mothers and 5 children between them. The air inside was thick and stale, the single window painted shut and sealed with duct tape. 2 cots stood empty. The others were occupied by women who didn't speak, only watched with tired eyes. Corey was too exhausted to be afraid. He curled up beside her on the narrow mattress and was asleep before she'd even finished undressing him. Monica lay beside him, listening to the rustle of blankets, the occasional muffled crying from another bed, and the whisper of her own breath in the darkness. She didn't sleep that night. The following days blurred into each other. The shelter had rules: be out by 8 a.m., return by 6 p.m., no loitering. During the day, Monica walked. With Corey's small hand in hers, she wandered the city in search of something better. She carried copies of her resume, outdated but printed carefully at the public library, and asked about jobs at diners, gas stations, janitorial firms, anywhere. She smiled through each conversation, spoke clearly, stood tall, but the moment she reached the part where she explained her most recent job, the moment she uttered the words, "terminated for policy violation," the shift in energy was unmistakable. Managers' eyes narrowed slightly, voices turned guarded. "We'll call you," they said. "We'll keep your application on file." They never did. By the end of the first week, her remaining money was gone. She pawned her watch, an old gift from her mother, once engraved with "To Monica for time well spent," and used the cash to buy 2 weeks' worth of asthma medication. It wasn't the good kind, the kind she used to prescribe as a nurse, but it was something. She rationed it carefully, counting doses, praying Corey wouldn't have another major episode. The shelter gave them dinner, often lukewarm soup and white bread, and cereal in the mornings. It wasn't enough. Monica gave most of her portions to Corey and lied when he asked why she wasn't hungry. She drank tap water to stay full. Every evening, the intake worker made a note about each resident. Monica heard them whisper once, "She's proud, doesn't complain, keeps her kid clean at least." It stung, but she let it go. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford anymore. She just wanted safety, stability, a chance. Then came the warning. A woman from the county came by the shelter on a Tuesday morning. She wore a bright yellow jacket and carried a clipboard filled with neatly clipped files. She smiled tightly, in that way bureaucrats do when they're trying to soften bad news. She pulled Monica aside. They spoke in a narrow hallway, the air thick with the smell of mildew and bleach. "We've received a concern," she said. "Anonymous." Monica's stomach dropped. "They say your son's health is deteriorating, that your housing situation is unstable. If his condition worsens and it appears that you're unable to provide adequate care, we may need to intervene." Monica didn't cry. She didn't scream. She nodded, listened, thanked the woman. Then she returned to the room and sat beside Corey as he colored superheroes on the back of an old cereal box. His crayons were worn down to stubs, but his focus was intense. When he looked up and smiled, Monica forced herself to return it. That night, she couldn't eat at all. She began applying for jobs further out: warehouses, overnight sanitation crews, medical waste facilities. She walked miles across the city with Corey's tiny hand gripping hers. Her shoes wore thin. Her feet blistered and bled. One night, she sat in the shelter bathroom with her socks soaked red, scrubbing them out in the sink so the blood wouldn't show in the morning. She lost track of the days. She spoke less, smiled less. Corey still smiled, but it was quieter now, softer, like he knew she was holding something heavy and didn't want to add to it. Then came the night at the gas station. They had been turned away from the shelter that evening. Overcrowded, a plumbing issue, come back tomorrow. It was cold and windy, and the rain returned like a cruel joke. Monica had nowhere to go. She wrapped Corey in his blanket and sat on the floor of the all-night gas station, tucked into the far corner near the restroom door. An older woman behind the counter noticed. She didn't ask questions, just brought them a small cup of hot water with sugar and a package of crackers. "You can stay in the restroom," she whispered. "It locks from the inside." It wasn't much, but it was warm, dry. That night, Corey had another attack. His breathing turned shallow and he clutched at her shirt with desperate fingers. Monica held him close, pressing the inhaler to his lips, whispering, "Just breathe, baby. Please breathe." She counted the seconds, her voice shaking, her hands trembling. He calmed eventually, fell asleep in her arms. She sat on the cold floor, holding him tightly, her back against the restroom wall, watching the flickering light overhead as if it held the answer to a question she hadn't dared to ask. That was the lowest point. Not the hunger, not the job rejection, not even the threat from child services. It was the moment she realized that she was completely invisible to the world. A woman with a sick child in a locked gas station restroom, begging the darkness for just one more breath. And no one noticed. No one but Corey. Because even in sleep, his small hand clutched her shirt like an anchor. Like he knew she was the only thing between him and the abyss. She worked that night. Cleaned the restroom before they left, washed the mirrors, picked up the trash, scrubbed the floor with paper towels, just to say thank you. The next night, the attendant let her stay again. This time there was a blanket from the trunk of her car. She said it smelled like dog hair but was clean. Monica didn't care. She offered to clean in exchange. Every night she wiped surfaces, mopped with borrowed supplies, made the little space sparkle. It wasn't a job, but it was something. And then, one morning, as they were leaving, the attendant handed her a flyer. It was crumpled and a little smudged, but the print was still legible. "Rivera Solutions," it read. "Now, hiring, no diploma required." Monica stared at it for a long time, afraid to believe it. "They clean offices," the woman said, "and I heard the guy who runs it. He's one of us. Might understand." That night, Monica looked at Corey, sleeping on a folded towel, his face flushed with a low fever, his hand curled under his cheek. She brushed back his curls and whispered, tomorrow we try again. And this time she meant it. Morning came gray and heavy, with clouds low over the skyline and streets still slick from last night's rain. Monica pulled the blanket up around Corey's chin and kissed his forehead. He was still warm, but no longer burning. His breath came slow and soft now, and for that she was grateful. She took a moment to just watch him, the rise and fall of his chest, the way his tiny fingers curled against the towel under his head, the faint smile twitching at his lips as he dreamed. It reminded her what she was fighting for. She folded the blanket carefully, wiped down the sink one last time, and thanked Carol, the gas station attendant, with a nod that carried more meaning than words. Carol handed her a peanut butter sandwich in a paper napkin, a juice box she'd taken from her own lunch, and gave her a look that was neither pity nor concern, just quiet respect. That alone brought tears to Monica's eyes. She held Corey's hand as they boarded the bus. 2 transfers, and 90 minutes later, they stood in front of a plain, 2-story building in an industrial part of the city. The sign above the entrance read, Rivera Solutions, in bold navy letters flanked by smaller text, Commercial Facilities Management. It wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. Monica stared at it for a long time, gathering the fragments of herself. She adjusted her backpack on one shoulder, smoothed her shirt over her jeans, and bent down to zip Corey's hoodie higher up against the wind. He clutched her hand tightly, but didn't complain. He never did. Inside, the building smelled faintly of lemon polish and clean tile. The lobby was modest but bright, with a single desk staffed by a young woman tapping at a computer. Monica approached, heart hammering, and gave her name. The woman nodded politely and handed her a clipboard with an application form. There were no questions, no judgment, just a pen. Monica sat on a plastic chair, balancing the clipboard on her knee while Corey nestled against her side. She moved through the questions with care. Name, address, emergency contact. She left it blank. Past employment. She listed the laundromat, omitting any mention of her medical background. That life felt like a dream now, one she wasn't sure she had ever lived. And then it came, the question she had dreaded. Have you ever been terminated from a previous job? If yes, please explain. Her pen hovered. She could lie. She could check no and hope no one called. But the weight of that falsehood would hang over her like a curse. She had promised herself that if she ever wanted to be seen again, truly seen, she had to tell the truth. She marked the box for yes. Her fingers trembled as she wrote the explanation carefully in small, neat letters. Brought my child to work due to emergency illness. Violation of company policy. No incident occurred. No harm caused. Corey coughed beside her, and Monica reached to steady him, patting his back gently. He leaned into her, eyes drooping. The inhaler in her bag had maybe 2 doses left. She pressed a kiss to the top of his head and held the clipboard a little closer to her chest. She stood and returned the application to the receptionist. The woman smiled, took the papers, and asked her to wait. Monica sat down again and shifted her focus to the glass doors. She could see the parking lot, the motion of cars, the way the wind caught stray leaves. All of it seemed very far away. That was when he walked in. The man was tall, lean, with skin the color of rich earth and hair just beginning to gray at the temples. He wore dark jeans and a rolled-up white shirt, sleeves pushed to his elbows, revealing arms that looked like they had known hard work. He moved with purpose, holding a phone in one hand and a ring of keys in the other, But as he stepped into the lobby, his gaze caught on Monica and her son. It wasn't a long look. Not exactly, but it stopped him. His eyes flicked from Corey's small, tired frame to Monica's tense posture. His brow furrowed slightly, as if some recognition stirred behind his gaze. Monica met his eyes for a brief second, then looked away. She expected him to move on. Most people did, but he didn't. Not right away. He paused, glanced at the receptionist, then back at Monica. A flicker of something, memory perhaps, moved across his face. Then he nodded, almost imperceptibly, and turned down the hall without a word. Monica watched him go, uncertain if she had imagined the entire moment. That afternoon, as they rode the bus back toward the shelter, Monica kept her hand over the phone in her pocket. She didn't expect it to ring. She had stopped hoping for that kind of miracle. But the next day, it did. "Miss Harper," said a warm voice on the other end. "This is Elena from Rivera Solutions. We'd like to offer you a part-time custodial position on the afternoon shift. You'd start tomorrow." Monica froze. "Wait, really?" "Yes. And we understand you may need to bring your child. There's a break room available, as long as he remains supervised and stays out of active work zones." Monica swallowed. Thank you. Thank you so much." The call ended. She didn't move for a long moment, then turned to Corey, who was sitting on the cot with a handful of crayons. "We got it," she whispered. "Mama's working again." The next day felt different. She washed their clothes at a laundromat near the shelter and ironed her only collared shirt. Corey wore the jeans Maria had found in the donation bin and a slightly oversized hoodie. He held her hand tightly on the bus, and when they arrived at the Rivera building, he looked up at it with quiet awe. They were greeted at the front by Elena, a kind-eyed woman with a gentle manner. She showed Monica where to store her things, gave her a key to the janitorial supply closet, and pointed out the small break room, a modest space with a second-hand couch, a mini fridge, and an old TV with a stack of DVD cases beside it. Corey curled up with his crayons and a sketch pad Elena had placed on the table. Monica put on gloves, tied her apron tight, and started working. She mopped tile floors, cleaned restroom sinks until they gleamed, and polished glass doors until her reflection stared back clearly. Her body ached by the third hour, but she kept going. She moved with purpose, with gratitude, with the silent fire of someone who had walked through hell and survived. Near the end of her shift, she glanced through the hallway window and saw the man from the lobby again. He passed by slowly, paused for a moment when he saw her working, then gave a small nod, not of authority, but of recognition. She nodded back, unsure who he was, but knowing instinctively that he mattered. Later that week, she found something unexpected. When she went to check on Corey during her break, she stopped in the doorway. He was sitting upright on the couch, his hands frozen midair over a small table. Spread out before him was a neat array of treasures, a brand new box of colored pencils, 2 thick comic books, and a small stuffed lion with soft fur and a crooked smile. "Mama, where did this come from?" Corey asked in a hushed voice. Monica stared at the items, then stepped closer. She picked up the pencil box and flipped it over, as if some explanation would be written on the back. Nothing. She opened one of the comic books. The pages were crisp, smelling of new ink. I don't know," she whispered. Corey's eyes lit up with the kind of joy she hadn't seen in weeks. "Can I keep them?" Monica nodded, too stunned to speak. "Yes, baby, of course." Later, during her next break, she asked Elena if anyone had left the gifts. "No idea," Elena said, smiling. maybe one of the office staff. But it's sweet, isn't it? Monica smiled and murmured a soft thank you, not to anyone in particular, but to the building itself, as if it had chosen to show her kindness. Down the hallway, in a partially open office, the man with the gray at his temples stood silently. He had passed the break room just moments earlier, unseen. He had watched the boy reach for the pencils with trembling hands and had remembered himself, sitting in the corner of a hotel lobby, his mother scrubbing floors until midnight, and a janitor quietly leaving a toy on a bench. It had meant the world. Now, all these years later, he found himself standing still, watching history rhyme. And though he didn't mean to linger, he did. Because something in Monica's quiet strength reminded him of the woman who had raised him, someone who had nothing and still gave everything. He stepped back into his office and shut the door softly. In the quiet, he looked at the wall, then down at his hands, and for the first time in a very long time, he felt something shift. The rhythm of work became familiar, almost comforting. Each day, Monica arrived before her shift, dressed in the same carefully ironed shirt, the same dark pants with a barely visible thread pulled loose near the knee. She would lead Corey by the hand through the lobby, nodding a quiet greeting to Elena at the desk. They'd stop by the break room, still a small space tucked behind the mailroom with a cracked couch, a humming mini-fridge, and the box of DVDs stacked like old memories. Corey would curl up on the couch with his sketch pad, already waiting, pencils laid out like precious tools, the little lion always tucked against his side. Monica would kneel beside him, check the inhaler, brush his curls off his forehead, and whisper, "Be good, baby. I'll check on you soon." He always nodded. Then she worked. She scrubbed the floors of conference rooms with wide circular movements, cleaned sinks and countertops until her hands stung from the bleach. She took pride in the straightness of the mop lines she left behind, the way the glass doors gleamed after she wiped them down. The rhythm helped her forget how tight money still was, how she and Corey still lived night to night at the shelter, how one unexpected illness could send everything crashing again. Each motion, each scrub was part of a prayer. Keep him safe, keep him breathing, just one more day. She never asked questions about the things that began to appear. It started with the pencils and the comic books, then, days later, there was a small fleece blanket left folded on the couch. Another morning, a fresh set of colored markers in a plastic bag with no label. Once, she found a granola bar tucked into the pocket of Corey's backpack, the kind he used to love when she could afford them. And one evening, when the inhaler she had been rationing finally ran dry, she opened her locker and found a new one sealed in its box with a sticky note that simply read, "For the breaths that matter most." Monica didn't ask. She didn't tell anyone, but she knew. There weren't many people it could be. Elena had no reason to move so quietly. The other cleaning staff barely spoke English, and none of them went near the lockers. She thought of the man, the one from the lobby, the one who nodded instead of speaking, who watched instead of commanding. She still didn't know his name, but every time she passed him in the hallway, he would meet her gaze with the same quiet steadiness. And something unspoken would pass between them. It wasn't charity. That was what made it bearable. Monica could feel it. This was something else. Not pity, not obligation. It was recognition. As if someone had seen her not as a struggling woman, not as a broken mother, but as a mirror. Every hour or so, she would pause her work and return to the break room. Corey would still be there, curled on the couch, coloring carefully, his lion tucked close. She'd crouch beside him and wipe his forehead with the edge of her sleeve, the scent of ammonia still clinging to her clothes. "You okay, baby?" she'd whisper, brushing his curls from his temple. And Corey would always nod, too tired to say much, but always looking into her eyes as if to anchor himself. And she would smile, kiss his cheek, and go back to work. They learned this rhythm together. Monica cleaned, Corey rested, and the hours passed like silent promises. Some days, when the break room was especially quiet, Corey would draw her little comics, tiny stick figure heroes with big hearts and wide grins. He called one of them Super Cleaner, a woman in a cape who wielded a mop like a sword and had a lion as her sidekick. Monica kept those drawings folded in her pocket. They made the hours easier. One Wednesday afternoon, as she returned to the break room, she stopped in the doorway. Corey was sitting upright, his back straight, eyes wide in awe. Before him on the table was a brand-new sketchbook, thick and spiral-bound, with a set of professional artist pencils in a zippered case. Beside it lay a small plastic dinosaur toy with a sticky note taped to its side that read, "From one little fighter to another." Corey looked up at her. "Mama, did you do this?" Monica stepped closer, breath catching in her throat. She shook her head slowly. "Then who?" She didn't answer. Instead, she knelt beside him and picked up the pencil case, turning it over in her hands. High quality, not cheap, the kind she hadn't even dared dream of lately. She opened the case and stared at the smooth graphite tips, each one perfectly sharpened. Corey looked at her, hope blooming on his face. "Can I draw in it?" Monica nodded, her voice tight. "Of course, baby. It's yours." She stepped out into the hallway a few minutes later, still holding the empty wrapper from the toy. She didn't cry, not here, but something swelled inside her that had been dormant for too long, a warmth that had nothing to do with heat, gratitude without strings, help that didn't ask for anything back. She found herself walking slowly down the hall, glancing through open office doors, wondering who had chosen to be kind to her boy in such a quiet way, wondering why. The next evening, after her shift, she returned to the break room with a single banana and a peanut butter packet, both quietly lifted from the shelter kitchen. Corey was finishing a new drawing, his head bent low, tongue poking slightly from the corner of his mouth in concentration. Monica sat beside him, watching. "It's you," he said suddenly, handing her the sketch. "Super Cleaner and Leo the Lion." She laughed, pressing her hand to her heart. "That's me?" "Yeah," he said proudly, "and you saved the day again." That night, as Monica mopped the third-floor hallway, she heard footsteps behind her and turned to see the man standing a few feet away. He wasn't dressed like an executive, no tie, no briefcase, but there was something about him, authority in his stillness, kindness in the way his gaze settled on her without judgment. "I'm not here to interrupt," he said softly. "I just wanted to say you're doing a great job. Everyone notices." Monica stared for a beat, then nodded. "Thank you," she said quietly. He hesitated, then added, "If you ever need anything, please ask. That's not just something we say." She didn't answer, but as he walked away, she allowed herself a small breath of relief. Days turned to weeks. The shelter remained crowded, but Monica managed to keep their cot clean, their bags organized. She saved a few dollars each week, tucking them into an envelope beneath her clothes. She began making lists: apartments, preschools, clinics. Nothing affordable yet, but she was thinking about tomorrow again. Then, one evening, it rained. Not the soft mist of earlier weeks, but a sudden, vicious downpour. Monica stood just inside the side exit of the building, Corey wrapped tightly in her arms. Her coat was too thin, and the borrowed umbrella from the shelter had broken in the wind. Water pooled on the pavement outside, and the sky rumbled with distant thunder. She took a deep breath and stepped forward. A shadow moved beside her. A large, dark umbrella opened above them. Monica looked up in surprise to see him, standing silent, steady, holding the umbrella with one hand, the other in his coat pocket. He said nothing, just walked with her, step by step, across the lot. They reached the edge of the sidewalk before he spoke. No one who tries that hard to do the right thing deserves to walk in the rain. He handed her the umbrella, then turned and walked back toward the building, his shoes splashing in the puddles without hesitation. Monica stood there, stunned, Corey's cheek pressed against her neck, the umbrella above them shielding them from the storm. The wind pulled at her coat and the rain pounded around them, but under that umbrella, for the first time in months, she felt completely dry. She didn't know his name, but she knew what he was. A quiet angel, not here to rescue her, just to remind her she wasn't alone. The umbrella became a fixture. Monica folded it carefully each night, dried it by the heater at the shelter, and carried it everywhere, even when the skies were clear. She never spoke about that evening, never told anyone how he had appeared beside her in the rain, how he had walked with her in silence, then vanished just as quietly. But she thought about it often, especially when the world felt heavy again. It hadn't been about the umbrella, it was about the message. Someone saw her. Not as a problem to fix or a rule breaker to fire, but as a woman trying, surviving, enduring. At Rivera Solutions, her shifts became steadier, her tasks more efficient. She moved through the building with calm precision, mop and cart in hand, wiping down windows and checking supply rooms with the ease of someone who knew every corner. She didn't speak much, but the other workers began to greet her more warmly. Elena often smiled when she passed, offering a brief nod or wordless gesture. Even the delivery drivers, who used to ignore her entirely, now held doors open. Corey remained the quiet center of her world. Each day, Monica checked on him every hour without fail. Sometimes she found him asleep, curled around the line, his breathing slow and even. Other times, he would be sketching superheroes with intense focus, tongue between his teeth, his fingers smudged with graphite. He drew her more often now, sometimes with a mop and gloves, sometimes in a cape, but always strong, always smiling. In his world, she was never tired, never scared, just brave. One evening, she returned to the break room to find Corey sitting cross-legged at the table, a look of concentration on his face. Spread out before him was a new drawing. A tall man with gray streaks in his hair, standing beside a woman and child beneath a large umbrella. The figures were cartoonish but unmistakable. Above them, written in thick black letters, were the words, "Thank you, Mr. Bruce. You're like a quiet superhero." Monica stared at the drawing. Who's Bruce? Corey looked up, shrugging. That man. The one who gave us the umbrella. Monica's breath caught. How do you know his name? I asked Elena. Corey said simply, returning to his coloring. She said he's the boss. That night, after the building emptied out, Monica stood in the third-floor hallway, bucket beside her, mop in hand, staring at a closed office door with a small gold plaque. Bruce Rivera, Director. So that was his name. She didn't knock, didn't need to, but somehow, knowing it made something settle in her chest. Bruce. The man who left inhalers in lockers, pencils on tables, umbrellas in storms. The man who saw without speaking. 2 days later, Monica found a new note taped inside her locker, just above the shelf where she stored Corey's spare inhaler and blanket. It read, in neat handwriting, "Lunch for you and your hero. covered through the month, no strings. Inside the break room fridge were small, neatly labeled containers: grilled chicken, rice, fruit cups, juice boxes, fresh, warm, not from a shelter line. Monica opened one and inhaled deeply, the scent nearly making her dizzy. She sat beside Corey and handed him a spoon. He didn't ask where it came from. He just smiled and said, "You got promoted to lunch, Mama." That weekend, Monica found herself waiting by the vending machine in the back hallway, pretending to study the snack options. She knew Bruce's schedule by now. He stayed late most Fridays, locked in his office, the light on long after the cleaners finished. When he appeared at the end of the corridor, she stepped away from the machine and nodded. He nodded back, hesitated, then came closer. "I think Corey's drawings are getting better," he said gently. "The one he gave me, it's on my wall." Monica smiled. "He draws what makes him feel safe." Bruce was quiet a moment. "He sees you as his hero?" She didn't know what to say to that. It felt too heavy, too honest. "I always wondered," she said, keeping her eyes on the floor. "Why do you care? About us, you didn't have to." Bruce exhaled slowly. "Because I was Corey, and my mom, she was a Monica." She looked up. He continued, voice low. "She worked night shifts in hotels, cleaned rooms while I slept in linen closets. We never had money, but I always had food, always had her. She used to hum lullabies while she scrubbed bathroom tiles. I'd fall asleep to the sound of her breath and bleach." Monica blinked hard. "She sounds like someone I would have liked." Bruce nodded. "She died young. Heart gave out, no warning, no insurance. But she left me with one thing that mattered more than anything: dignity. She never let me feel like I was a burden." Neither of them spoke for a long time. Then Monica reached out and placed a hand on his arm. It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't desperation. It was understanding. Grief recognizing grief. Strength honoring strength. After that, things changed again. When Monica passed Bruce in the hallway, there was a new kind of acknowledgement in his eyes. Not admiration, not infatuation. Something quieter, something real. Respect, familiarity. Corey began asking to come in early to show Bruce his latest comic ideas. Bruce would kneel beside him at the break room table, listening seriously, asking questions like a publisher considering a manuscript. Monica watched from the doorway, arms crossed, letting herself smile. Some days, Bruce would leave a small book tucked into Corey's art folder. Sometimes a chessboard appeared, and the two of them would play clumsy games, laughing when Bruce made mistakes on purpose. Corey always noticed. He never said a word. At work, Monica kept rising. Elena began giving her more responsibilities, restocking supplies, guiding new hires, organizing rotations. Staff began looking to her with questions, asking for her help. She never asked for promotion, but the respect was there, growing. One morning, as she wiped down the glass in the front lobby, she overheard two employees talking. "She's the heart of the building," one said. "Don't know how she does it," the other replied. "Every day with that boy, and still shows up stronger than anyone." Monica pretended not to hear, but she carried those words with her all day. That afternoon, Corey brought her another drawing. It was a superhero again. This time a woman with curly hair and gloves, holding a bucket in one hand and a clipboard in the other. On her chest was a shield with the letter M. Behind her stood a little boy with a line in his arms. Above them floated a banner that read, "Mama, stronger than steel, softer than rain." Monica folded it carefully and placed it in her locker. That night, she stayed after hours to clean the supply closet. As she knelt on the linoleum, stacking bottles of disinfectant and aligning mop heads on the shelf, she heard the sound of laughter, light, wheezing, but real. She turned. Corey was lying on a folded towel nearby, pale but smiling. Monica had twisted a rag into a puppet and was making it dance across his blanket, giving it a high, ridiculous voice. "Senor Sock is here to save the day," she squeaked, wiggling the puppet. Corey giggled, reaching for it, eyes shining. From the narrow crack in the door, Bruce stood motionless. He had come down to check on a delivery but stopped when he heard the laughter. What he saw held him in place. Monica, exhausted, cheeks flushed from hours of cleaning, crouched on the floor with a sock puppet in hand, her son laughing as if nothing else in the world mattered. Bruce stepped back quietly, returned to his office, and closed the door. He sat down slowly and stared at the ceiling. He remembered his mother, the way she used her socks to make him laugh on Christmas Eve when there were no toys, the way she gave him joy, even in a motel back room with nothing but love and imagination. He rubbed his eyes, but it wasn't fatigue that burned. It was memory. 3 days later, the rain returned. Heavy, soaking sheets that flooded the sidewalks and turned the parking lot into a shallow lake. Monica stepped out, holding Corey tight, his head buried in her jacket. She didn't have an umbrella. The one Bruce had given her had finally broken the day before. She wrapped her arms tighter, stepping into the rain. A shadow moved beside her. A dark umbrella opened above them. Bruce. He didn't speak. They walked side by side in silence, rain falling all around them but never touching them. Corey peeked out, wide-eyed, then tucked his face back into his mother's neck. At the end of the lot, Bruce stopped. He handed her the umbrella. "No one who tries that hard to do the right thing deserves to walk in the rain," he said softly. Then he turned and walked back into the storm. Monica stood still, umbrella in one hand, her son in the other. And for the first time in a long, long time, she didn't feel wet. She felt whole. The days that followed the storm moved with a quiet momentum. Monica woke earlier, stood straighter, and walked with a sense of quiet purpose that hadn't been there before. Something had shifted, not in the world around her. She still returned to the shelter each night, still counted every dollar, still watched Corey's breathing with the same maternal intensity. But inside her, the thread that had been pulled so tight it nearly snapped had found slack. She no longer moved like a woman trying not to fall apart. She moved like a woman who had been broken and had chosen to stand back up anyway. Rivera Solutions grew busier that month. New contracts meant new faces, new tasks. Monica began to notice subtle changes in her responsibilities. Elena would hand her the updated schedules without needing to explain. The other custodians, many of whom had barely spoken to her before, started asking for her opinion, following her lead. She found herself coordinating breaks, double-checking supply levels, helping train a few of the newer hires. No one had made an announcement, and Monica had never asked for anything. But the shift was there, like a tide turning slowly beneath the surface. On a rainy Wednesday afternoon, Monica walked into the break room to find Corey laughing, his cheeks flushed, his curls damp with sweat. Bruce was sitting across from him at the little table, pretending to examine a child's drawing with professional seriousness. Monica stood in the doorway, watching. Corey's sketch was vibrant. Super cleaner and lion boy fighting off a cartoonish villain made of trash and dirty mop water. "You're getting pretty good at this," Bruce said, tapping the paper. "I think you've got a whole comic series in you." Corey beamed. "Mama says heroes don't need superpowers, just heart." Bruce looked up and caught Monica's eye. Something passed between them, that unspoken understanding they'd shared since the beginning. The quiet bridge that had formed between two people who knew what it meant to struggle and love and refused to give up. A few days later, flyers began appearing around the building. The company was planning an anniversary celebration. 5 years since Rivera Solutions had opened its doors. There would be cake, food, speeches. Monica noted it, but didn't think much of it. Events like that weren't for people like her. She planned to work through it as usual. But when the day arrived, Elena gently pulled her aside. "You're expected at the warehouse," she said, her voice kind but firm. "No cleaning today. Come dressed as you are. Corey, too." Monica hesitated. "Is this mandatory?" Elena smiled. "Just be there." Monica didn't own much, but she ironed her cleanest uniform shirt and brushed Corey's hair twice before tucking his sketchbook under his arm. Maria, the shelter neighbor with lavender-scented scarves, had pressed a white shirt for Corey and helped find a small pair of black dress shoes from the donation bin. They didn't match, but they were clean and polished. The warehouse was transformed. Folding chairs lined the space, and blue and white balloons, the Rivera Company colors, bounced gently in the air currents from the ceiling fans. Long tables were laid out with trays of empanadas, rice dishes, cookies, and a massive sheet cake. Workers gathered in clusters, laughing, swapping stories in Spanish and English. There was music playing softly from a speaker in the corner. The smell of food and the warmth of shared labor filled the air. Monica stood near the back with Corey beside her. She felt out of place, but no one looked at her like she didn't belong. In fact, a few people smiled and waved. One of the new janitors offered her a plate of food. She took it, unsure whether to eat it or simply hold it as a shield. When Bruce stepped onto the makeshift stage, the room quieted almost instantly. He didn't stand behind a podium. Just in front of the microphone, sleeves rolled to his elbows, hands resting casually at his sides. "Thank you all for being here," he began. 5 years ago, I started this company with a borrowed mop and 3 contracts. I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew what I wanted to build." His voice was calm, even. Everyone listened. "I wanted to create something real," he said. "A place where the people who do the hardest work are treated with respect, where no one has to hide who they are just to keep a job, where we see each other." He scanned the crowd, then paused. His gaze landed on Monica. "I want to tell you a story," he said. "When I was a kid, my mother was a janitor. She worked nights in a motel, and she couldn't afford childcare. So she brought me with her. I slept in closets, on piles of towels, on cold tile floors while she cleaned toilets and scrubbed carpets. She never complained, never asked for help. She just kept going." The room was silent. Even the balloons seemed to still. "Not long ago," Bruce continued, "I saw a young mother doing the same thing. Tired, overworked, loving her son with everything she had. I saw her and I remembered." He swallowed, and for a moment, his voice wavered. "I am proud to work alongside someone like Monica Harper," he said. "Her strength, her grace, her commitment. She is everything this company stands for." Monica froze. Corey looked up at her wide-eyed. The room burst into applause. "And so," Bruce added, raising his voice slightly, "it is my honor to officially promote Monica to supervising custodian, effective immediately." The applause grew louder. A few people stood. Monica felt her knees go weak. Corey tugged her hand and whispered, "You did it, Mama." She could barely breathe, couldn't move, could only look at Bruce, who was smiling at her, not as a boss, not as a savior, but as someone who had been where she was and knew what this moment meant. And, Bruce continued, Rivera Solutions will be providing a full education scholarship for Corey Harper through high school and into college if he chooses, because no child should carry the weight of their parents' struggle alone. The room exploded. Cheers, laughter. Some wiped away tears. Monica stood there, hands shaking, eyes burning. She wasn't crying for the promotion or the scholarship or even the recognition. She was crying because for the first time in so long, she didn't feel invisible. Bruce stepped off the stage and walked straight toward her. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at her with quiet, steady eyes, the same way he had that first day in the lobby. There was a question there, but not the kind that needed an answer. She nodded, unable to speak. He smiled. The rest of the day passed in a blur. People shook her hand, hugged her, offered kind words in languages she barely understood but felt deeply. Corey beamed all afternoon, talking about his scholarship like it was a superpower. Elena handed Monica a clean name tag with her new title. She held it in her hand for a long time before finally pinning it to her shirt. Later that night, after the event, Monica and Corey returned to the shelter. The cots were the same, the room still small and crowded, but something felt different. Monica placed the name tag on the small nightstand beside their bags and sat down heavily. Corey leaned against her. "You're gonna be the boss now," he said sleepily. "I guess I am," Monica whispered. "And I'm gonna go to college," he added, as if stating a fact. "Yes, baby, you are." He drifted off in minutes. Monica lay beside him, one arm wrapped around his small body, staring at the ceiling. She thought of the motel closets Bruce had mentioned, of his mother, of hers, of all the women who worked quietly in the corners of the world and never asked for applause. She thought of what it meant to be seen, really seen. And as she closed her eyes, she knew this wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of something she hadn't dared hope for in years, a new chapter, and this time she wasn't riding it alone. The rain had stopped, but the streets still shimmered with the aftermath. Puddles pooled in the cracks of the sidewalk, catching the amber glow of streetlights. Monica stood at the bus stop across from the Rivera building, the umbrella Bruce had given her tucked under one arm, a takeout container balanced in the other, and her son's fingers curled around hers. Corey swung her hand gently, humming under his breath, as if the day had been nothing more than an ordinary Thursday. But nothing about it was ordinary anymore. Not for them. In the days following the company's anniversary celebration, life took on a new shape. Monica adjusted to her new role with the same quiet determination she had used to clean stairwells and break room sinks. Supervising meant more hours, more responsibility, but it also meant stability. It meant a paycheck that stretched further, meant she could begin looking for something beyond the shelter walls. It meant a desk of her own, a key card, a small corner office that smelled like possibility. She wore her name badge with pride now. Monica Harper, supervisor. And though she still pushed carts and checked cleaning schedules, there was a difference in how others saw her. Staff stopped to ask questions, listened when she spoke. Even Elena deferred to her judgment when it came to restructuring tasks or offering feedback. Monica had never asked for authority, but it fit her like a second skin, earned and worn with grace. For Corey, the shift was even more profound. Rivera Solutions partnered with a local nonprofit that handled scholarship placements. Within a week, he was enrolled in a new school on the east side of town. Clean classrooms, well-stocked libraries, kind teachers who welcomed him on a first-name basis. On his second day, He came home with a grin that wouldn't fade and a slip of paper showing he had borrowed 3 books on superheroes and science experiments. "He knew my name, Mama," Corey had said, clutching the paper to his chest, "before I even told him." Monica had barely held back her tears. For a child like Corey, who had lived in the margins of society, shuffled through clinics, shelters, waiting rooms, that small act of recognition was a revolution. Some afternoons, when her shift ended early, she would stop by his school and watch him through the window. She never went inside, just stood outside the fence and watched her boy reading on a beanbag, safe, steady, breathing easy. Sometimes Bruce was there too, leaning against the doorframe of his office, or walking with Corey down the hallway, letting the child chatter endlessly about his latest drawing or story. Bruce never made it formal. There were no grand gestures, no awkward declarations. But he showed up, again and again. He brought Corey new sketchbooks, claimed they'd just appeared on his desk. He corrected his chess moves during lunch breaks, letting the boy win just enough to keep him proud. He learned which comic characters Corey loved most and left copies of them, carefully wrapped on the break room shelf. And Monica noticed everything. She watched the way Bruce's eyes softened when Corey entered the room, how he would crouch beside him to speak at eye level, how he never once spoke down to him. She saw the way his hand sometimes lingered near hers a second longer than necessary when passing a folder or holding the break room door. She never pulled away. It wasn't romantic, not in the way movies would tell it. There were no stolen kisses or sweeping music. It was quieter than that, more sacred. It was 2 people moving slowly, gently, toward a space where neither had to pretend. Monica often thought back to the gas station nights, to the cracked tile floor beneath her, the flickering light above, Corey's wheezing breaths in the dark. She remembered the cold that crept through her coat, the fear that curled in her stomach like a fist. And she thought of how far they'd come. Not out of the woods, not yet, but no longer alone. One rainy evening, she worked late catching up on reports and training a new hire. By the time she clocked out, the building was quiet, the hallways dim. Elena had taken Corey back to the break room to wait. Monica collected her things, tired but content. As she stepped into the corridor near Bruce's office, something caught her eye. Just outside the door sat a neatly folded raincoat, deep blue with a lined hood. On top of it rested a small takeout container, still warm, steam curling at the corners, and a note. She picked it up with trembling hands. "Thank you for not giving up." No signature, no flourish, just the truth. She stared at the words, fingers grazing the edges, the scent of warm rice and grilled chicken rising into the stillness. Slowly, she turned her head. At the far end of the hallway, Bruce stood near the stairwell, one shoulder leaning against the wall. He wasn't smiling, but his face was soft, steady, like always. He didn't move toward her, didn't speak. He just nodded once, the kind of nod that held 1,000 words, and waited. Monica clutched the raincoat to her chest. She didn't speak either. She didn't need to. Some truths don't need repeating. The next morning, she wore the coat. It was a perfect fit. She took Corey to school, walked him inside for the first time, and watched him blend into the sea of children with confidence. The teachers waved. Corey beamed. Monica turned to leave and found Bruce waiting by the curb. No words again, just presence. They walked back together in silence, the sun slowly pushing through the clouds. In the weeks that followed, their rhythm deepened. She brought him coffee some mornings, left it on his desk before he arrived. He would send a text, "Still the best coffee in town." She began finding small comforts in his office, an extra chair, a new mug, a framed copy of Corey's superhero drawing. Corey, for his part, was thriving. His lungs grew stronger with proper medication. His drawings grew bolder. One afternoon, he walked into Bruce's office with a folded piece of paper and laid it on the desk. "This is for you." Bruce unfolded it. Another sketch. A tall man holding an umbrella, standing next to a boy and a woman, all smiling under a golden sky. The caption read, "Real heroes don't need capes, just heart." Bruce's throat tightened. "I'll keep it safe," he whispered. And he did. He taped it to the inside of his cabinet, right above the first drawing. That night, Monica found a new inhaler in her locker and 2 lunch containers marked with small stars. She didn't cry, but her hands trembled. Sometimes love doesn't announce itself. Sometimes it waits until the world softens enough to let it bloom. On a quiet Sunday, Bruce asked her to meet him on the rooftop terrace. He said it wasn't work-related. She nodded. The air up there was crisp, tinged with the smell of rain. The city stretched out before them in long lines and scattered lights. Monica stepped into the golden wash of sunset and saw him near the ledge, hands in his coat pockets, face turned to the skyline. She joined him. Their shoulders brushed. "You said it was important," she said gently. He turned, his smile tired and honest. "It is." He pulled a small box from his pocket. No velvet, no gold, just a simple white cardboard square. He opened it. Inside was a silver bracelet, thin and graceful. One word was engraved inside. Always. "I'm not proposing," he said quietly. "I don't have a speech, no grand plan." He held out the bracelet. "I just want you to know I'm here. Whenever you need me, however you need me, even if it's just sitting next to you while you breathe." Monica looked at the bracelet, then at him. She didn't speak. Instead, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, firm and certain. Not as someone seeking rescue, but as someone who had already rescued herself and was choosing now to let someone else stand beside her. She laid her head against his chest. "Thank you," she whispered. Bruce closed his eyes and held her. And somewhere below, the city pulsed on. Then came a shout. "Mama!" Corey burst onto the rooftop, his cheeks flushed, hair wild from running. He skidded to a stop when he saw them and grinned so wide his dimples showed. "You're smiling," he said breathlessly. "You look like a superhero now." Monica laughed, that clear, bright sound she thought she'd forgotten. She opened one arm, and Corey ran into it without hesitation. Bruce knelt beside them, wrapping the boy into the circle of warmth. The 3 of them huddled together as the last light of day bathed them in gold. There was no wedding, no ceremony, no titles. Just the kind of love that plants itself slowly, like a seed in dark soil, watered with trust. They stayed there a long while, watching the horizon. Because sometimes family isn't blood. It's the people who see the worst in you and stay. And under that rooftop sky, in the hush before nightfall, Monica knew the truth at last. She didn't need a perfect ending. This moment was enough. And it was everything. If this story moved you, make sure to subscribe for more just like it. Check out our other videos for more powerful journeys, and don't forget to share this one with someone who needs to hear it.